Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Balancing the Supply Chain and Your Direct-to-Consumer Business. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and we're lucky today to have three industry professionals with different and, in some cases, overlapping views of what's happening in the marketplace these days. Today, we're joined by David Hetherington of Books International, Jason Farrell of University of Toronto Press, and Sarah Arbuthnot of Supadu, recently acquired by the burgeoning empire of MediaDo. Each of them is going to talk from their own perspective about what's happening in the supply chain and what strategies and tactics you might be able to apply, and particularly with respect to the direct-to-consumer part of your business. We're going to kick things off by hearing from David Hetherington of Books International. David, take us away.
Well, folks, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I think hopefully we have a program that will be of some interest and value to you. So with that said, let's go to slide number one. Okay, so many of the things I'm going to share with you today are certainly not going to be new to you. Everyone on this call has been suffering from a variety of COVID-related issues. But the first thing, and clearly, it's absolutely certain that COVID-19 has exposed significant challenges, and at the same time, possible opportunities in operating models and how the supply chain works. The challenges are significant, but I believe, and I think that there's ample evidence to prove this, that many of them are surmountable, although perhaps not quite on the schedule we'd like to have it. But I think that there are opportunities here to run our businesses more effectively, both from the publisher side and from the supplier side, which I'm representing today. Our task is to learn from the pandemic and build a more resilient and responsive business model, right? But with pandemic speed, right? The idea here is that the old model, the old way of looking at things does not work. And what I would ask you to do, perhaps the one takeaway from today's session for the points that I will share with you, is to consider your organization's ROI. And in this case, I am not referring to the typical financial metric, which is return on investment, but I'm concerned here about the risk of inaction, right? There's simply too many things happening for us to behave like a deer in the headlights. That's either from the supplier side or from the publisher side. And now is the time to look closely at how you are conducting your operation and what you might do differently in order to prepare for eventualities that are coming up, right? Success is not an accident, right? It requires time and effort and commitment. And recall also that you are competing with other organizations for the resources of the manufacturing and the paper community. And the quicker you act, the better your organization will be. Another point, we are going into reprint season, so things are likely to get tougher. And a point that I will raise in a moment or two is that with election season coming up, with 2022 midterm elections, demand for paper will likely increase, and that there will be additional pressure on the market, and that will create options for the paper suppliers to perhaps look at more lucrative alternatives than the book business. Next slide, please. Okay, so building B2C capabilities is receiving significant attention as publishers work to reclaim customer relationships with Amazon. Why the attention on direct-to-consumer? Well, I think there's probably a few people on the call who did not suffer when Amazon shifted its focus from books to consumer goods, that we have an uncertain future for the bricks and mortar community, including college bookstores. Within bricks and mortar, the merchandise mix is changing. Anytime you visit a Barnes and Noble, or perhaps your independent bookstore, you will see more space relegated to merchandise because the margins are there. Non-book products will absolutely receive more attention. Another reason to do that is to recapture some of the margin that you're now giving to channel partners through discount. If you hold on to those relationships, if you build those relationships with your community, You're also establishing a long-term customer relationship that can have value in the event that there's some interest in selling your organization. Subscription revenue that is very attractive to private equity. And also, when you own that relationship, you can control it, you can capitalize it, you can expand it. And that's what our friends from Superdo will be talking about a bit later. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things that I would urge you to do is your organization should reduce the fixation that publishers have had with unit manufacturing costs. And I can speak to this from personal experience. I was on the publishing side of the desk for many years, and I know that unfortunately was one of the decision factors that prompted us in selecting suppliers and also in our inventory investment. The lower the manufacturing cost, the more likely we were to invest in additional inventory. But now with COVID, organizations need to focus on conserving cash, lowering the total cost of ownership, right? And making sure that product is available. Having the lowest unit cost possible does you no good if you can't fulfill your orders, right? The other thing that we would ask you to consider is increase your relationship with digital manufacturing to support a situational inventory strategy. Digital supports 3 inventory models, Offset does not, right? You may have folks on the call here who are in the Offset marketplace, and I clearly want to give them credit where credit is due, but print on demand, which is sell first and print later, automated stock replenishment, which is print first and sell later, but with minimum risk, and core, which is the traditional print first, keep your fingers crossed and sell later. Those 3 options are supported by digital. They are not supported by offset manufacturing. Another potential strategy is to print and fulfill from the same location. So if you're dealing with a digital book manufacturer, your orders can go directly to your customer rather than being pushed into your warehouse, right? And this is particularly critical as publishers build B2C capabilities to compete with Amazon. I think anyone would be hard pressed to say that Amazon's customer service isn't anything but exemplary, and we can come a lot closer to that if you print and fulfill from the same location. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, managing your cash and your fixed costs is paramount, especially in an environment with a high degree of uncertainty. I believe that the uncertainty that we are now seeing should be expected to be in place at minimum for the balance of 2022 and likely well into 2023. I think organizations need to look aggressively at reducing their fixed costs and shift to a volume-driven variable cost model. You want to reduce your overhead so that in the event that business heads south, you've got a way to protect your core operations by not having the burden of high fixed overhead. Some strategies, and many of you are using these right now, is that if you have your own warehouse, I would really look closely at outsourcing your warehouse, but retain the order to cash and customer service functions that are so critical to maintaining and building a relationship with your consumer. I would suggest that you also want to transition from on-premise to cloud operations to reduce your capital demands and strengthen security in a work-from-home environment. There's clear, unequivocal evidence that security risks, and there are any number of publishing and publishing-related organizations who've suffered ransomware attacks, increases dramatically in a work-from-home environment. I would urge you to regularly revisit your inventory and manufacturing strategy. Don't wait until you need it. Now is the time to go out. Now is the time to look at your options for manufacturing. Now is the time to consider alternatives. I was at a recent meeting of the Book Manufacturers Institute, and I was stunned to learn that one of the major publishers who was speaking at the event mentioned that they had begun business relationships with 10 other manufacturers that they've never talked to before. I would urge you to start that process now. I would urge you not to wait to look at your alternatives. Next. Okay, so let's talk about the P word, rising paper prices. Well, I think the rise in paper prices is certainly likely to continue. I think there will be absolute pressure on supply. There will be absolute pressure on capacity, with mills shifting to more profitable lines. The fact of the matter is that with the rise in e-commerce, many of the mills have shifted their capacity to producing corrugated and other packaging materials. There is now outside investment from private equity and from Asian buyers, and there's clearly an interest in capitalizing on the current situation. I think it is highly unlikely that you will see any major investment in the book business in the near term. So, as I said before, I will say again, do not underestimate the impact of the 2022 elections on paper supply. You want to focus on paper availability, less on cost. If you're buying your paper yourself, I would think about buying it from the printer. I would be very open to making great substitutions. The days of unlimited choice are over. I think we are at the point of reaching what I'll call a Henry Ford marketplace. And the legendary Henry Ford once said about one of his cars, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Well, I think we are likely to face a similar situation with paper. We are facing a situation of reduced manufacturing capability as some equipment is taken offline, acquisitions are rationalized, and privatization makes itself felt. And trucking costs are rising while capacity is shrinking. Prices rose 20% last year, with increases in 2022 and near certainty. In fact, this morning, I read an article about trucking costs in Europe are expected to increase by as much as 35% in 2022. This is a consequence of several factors, including fuel price increases and restrictions on the number of hours a driver can spend on the road, and also a shortage of qualified drivers. Next. Okay, so final thoughts, move quickly, don't wait too long, all right? Set a sector-specific strategy, ignore the hype about industry performance, right? I think it's a mistake to assume that the great performance that some organizations saw in 2021 will continue in 2022. In fact, the evidence so far suggests that that is not going to be the case, especially when, as we emerge from the pandemic and people have other things to spend their money on besides books. And managing the supply chain requires C-level participation and support. It cannot be done in a vacuum. You need your leadership team behind your supply chain effort. Shorten your supply chain. The longer the supply chain, the higher the risk. Expand your supply chain knowledge. Webinars like this are a great source of ideas, but also look at other industries for inspiration. I don't know if you're on LinkedIn, but if not, you might want to sign up for it. There's some great supply chain information that comes in there. Gartner has some especially insightful material, and also McKinsey has some great articles about managing the supply chain more effectively. And lastly, you really want to participate in industry organizations like the Book Industry Study Group. I think we make a great contribution to the knowledge base, and we'd certainly welcome your participation. And lastly, and anybody has any questions or would like to chat further, my contact information is here. Brian will be making the deck available for anyone who's interested. And Brian, with that said, I turn the dais over to Mr. Farrell, and thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. So I'm going to be increasing or expanding on some of the points that David mentioned earlier. And for illustration, to the right-hand side, I've put the map. This is the rail map of Canada, but the major highway map almost looks identical, with the exception of the small rail line that goes up to Churchill. And I pointed out the two areas on that map. And so as I'm going through this, our experience this year was confined to those bottlenecks, but there are other bottlenecks within this map. those are the most vulnerable ones. We had massive delays within Canada, mirroring the delays that you witnessed in the US and the Port of Los Angeles and the Pacific Northwest. We had flooding in November of 2021 in the Fraser Canyon. And the interesting thing about the Fraser Canyon, it's a choke point not only for major rail traffic, it's also a choke point for our national highway. International shortages in key raw materials, largely due to pandemic restrictions, but owing to other factors as well. Significant turnover in staff and a shortage in printing capacity within North America. And so what I wanted to highlight in the next couple of slides is that while some of this has been characterized as pandemic related, there are some underlying factors within the international supply chain and domestic supply chain challenges, both in Canada and the United States, which were the pandemic served as a catalyst to accelerate, but are certainly not going away in the near future. And these issues are causing many people to rethink supply chains as they go forward. So next slide. The first one is the capacity infrastructure. And what's highlighting on this is that the root causes of capacity and infrastructure, labor shortages, infrastructure capacity, and special cause weather events. Special cause weather events are actually starting to accelerate worldwide. Flooding and high risk fire on the West Coast in particular saw issues with the rail infrastructure leading to and off the port, as well as the ports themselves. The labor infrastructure I'll comment on further in another on the next slide. What I wanted to focus here is the capacity. If you're looking across the global anchorages internationally, you're not seeing the anchorage issues and the capacity issues confined to one region or one country. What it suggests is that international traffic has accelerated beyond the point of the ability for the local infrastructure to manage the volume. And certainly the pandemic accelerated this. But what we've noted in September 2021 to September 20, while Long Beach and Los Angeles certainly got the lion's share of the press, it was by no means unique globally. And that these issues globally are a byproduct of the same item, which is that our international traffic has accelerated beyond the capacity of local governments and national governments to invest and then make infrastructure available. And while that we've been able to build into existing capacity and use that capacity more efficiently in recent decades, we're now seeing a challenge in those ports and those rail lines and those highway lines to and from the ports, which is causing congestion. The one thing I wanted to go into the next slide is how labor is also accelerating and contributing to that factor. In the Canadian statistics are what I have listed to the left, but they're by no means unique to Canada. They're certainly being echoed in the United States. 60% of our truck drivers in Canada are 45 years or older, against a workforce participation rate of 46% nationally. The more alarming number is that 4% of our truck drivers are under 25 years of age, 13% nationally. So as the truck drivers leave the workforce, there's fewer people entering the workforce for this profession. The reasons are that there's a high cost of entry for for people wanting to participate in trucking. It's $30,000 in Canada to get a license for a Class A, Class 1 vehicle, as well as the cost of the vehicle itself. You're looking at upfront contributions anywhere from $175,000 to $250,000 to enter the workforce as a truck driver. Once you enter into the workforce as a truck driver, you're facing the increasing odds of automation, as there is well-publicized efforts to automate drivers and trucking in general. So workforce participation in individuals under 25 is lower. We're increasingly relying on an older workforce that is closer to retirement. The pandemic simply accelerated the move to truckers to retire early, but it was by no means an issue that's going away once the pandemic is over. The challenge is that it's a demographically constrained market, and that it is given to slow growth in new participants, while we're going to see rapid departure of individuals that are on the aged end of the spectrum demographically. And this challenge affects not only Canada, as I mentioned, but also the United States. And the issue we are seeing in trucking right now, it's not related to equipment, it is related to infrastructure, but the larger and more challenging strategic issue would it be founded in the demographic challenges within the trucking community. So this is causing the different industries and different individuals to look at their strategies differently and rethinking the model that's been in place for decades. And that model was in place because of relative capacity in infrastructure, stability in labor, and lower costs due to rationalization and better solutions and systems within transportation. Now that we've experienced some issues that are more systemic, we're identifying there are industries that are identifying new partners to minimize the risk. They're also improving and building closer relationships to existing partners. They're reducing the supply chain length. As David mentioned, this is causing risk and increased risk as we go on through the infrastructure challenges as well as labor challenges. For book publishing in general, the smaller production runs for POD, particularly for backlist titles. An interesting challenge with backlist titles is that the predictability of backlist sales has become more volatile with internet sales. And so the direct-to-consumer market, there might be a higher demand for backlist titles, but it is higher variability. And then the last item is protecting against attrition, is making sure we hold on to the talent that we have. There's an increasing challenge and a battle for talent that is building within the supply chain industry, both in Canada and the United States. How is UTP managing these needs? Well, we're improving our on-time outbound performance, and we're focusing primarily on the smaller orders. So lower unit per line charges are finding more efficient means to get to the pack-out station. And we're improving things like labeling and pack-out to improve our performance so that we can enable a market that's going for smaller orders more frequently to combat some of the issues that they're seeing in supply chain. We're reviewing in storage and space optimization. It's difficult to say whether the land cost is something that's systemic or related to a short-term issue. However, we are seeing accelerated cost in rent and warehouse costs in the Greater Toronto Area, which mirrors the urban issues, urban warehouse costs in the United States and elsewhere in Canada. We're investing in print-on-demand partnerships or business options within the warehouse where we can conduct our own print on demand. We're upgrading our online capabilities to provide better access to smaller orders to improve that efficiency in supply chain. We're implementing better transportation selection and consolidation technology. We are also looking at new partners and different ways to reach remote areas within Canada. We are improving our talent retention and acquisition approaches within University of Toronto and making sure we monitor key talent, especially key talent with high performance. And finally, we're staying connected to the ongoing challenges and changes. And we're monitoring this through our new partnerships and through new communication with our transportation and logistics partners elsewhere. And it's by staying in front of these challenges that we can continue to strategize and respond faster to the ongoing changes. With that, thank you for your time, and I'll pass you over to Sarah.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everybody for joining. I'm Sarah from Superdo, and just very quickly, for those who don't know who Superdo are, we build and support publisher websites and online stores. We've got around 250 publishers, 57 of which are university presses, and we manage over 2,000 websites and marketing sites around the world. So our products and services support publishers of all sizes, and this can be publishers using complete, fully automated e-commerce solutions or using a Superdo product with your existing websites. So how does Superdo fit into today's discussions? Well, we're focusing on improving your online direct-to-consumer business, and this can help you alleviate some of those supply chain issues which David and Jason have just spoken about. Book selling and book marketing are increasingly online, especially in the post-pandemic climate. And it's a huge opportunity for publishers to make the most of your websites and online spaces and create an easy path to purchase for your consumers. We've heard from both David and Jason about rethinking the model, the sell first, print later, and incorporating print on demand into your supply cycle. Your website is the perfect vehicle to deliver these types of strategies. But we also know that selling direct to consumer from your website isn't for every publisher. And if it's not for you, you can still use your websites to link out to your online retailers, which also increases your title visibility and your brand presence. So we're saying whether you have a website, an e-commerce store or not, you can still maximize your direct consumer online presence. And here we've listed 5 areas we recommend you focus on, starting with social media marketing and the benefit of building an online community that will be loyal to you, they'll buy from you. And then we'll look at your website search and how this can be as effective as possible alongside the product details pages for website engagement. And then finally, how you can create a seamless path to purchase if you do have an e-commerce store. COVID-19, the pandemic, has certainly accelerated direct-to-consumer sales growth within the publishing sector. And these figures are extraordinary, given the previous decade's growth was fairly slow in this side. In 2020, consumers increased their online spending by 44%, which may not seem surprising, but this translated into 18% growth in the US publishing sector and no signs of slowing down. And Ingram recently revealed in a webinar they ran earlier this month that book websites actually come in at 19 in the list of the top 20 most visited categories of pages on the internet, which is a huge shift in consumer behavior. So the D2C, the direct-to-consumer model, already provides higher margin revenue, but it's enabling publishers to gather extensive consumer data so you can build your online communities and widen your reach. And how we convert these opportunities into sales. Well, we use the tagline, find it, like it, buy it. Where do consumers first see the title, and how can you as a publisher make it easy for them to buy it? Social media marketing, starting with that, is a powerful driver of traffic to your sales channels and of course to your websites. In these examples, we're showing BookTok, Twitter, and Facebook, and they're from 3 of our publishers who have successfully used social media to direct purchasers to their website and store. The first, on the left, Manchester University Press, use short videos with internal staff talking about their books for TikTok. And they found that BookTok was one of the most surprising successes in driving demand for frontlist and backlist titles. And in fact, in that same webinar I just mentioned with Ingram, they revealed that in the last 2 years, backlist books have outsold frontlist titles 2 to 1, and much of it has been driven by social media marketing, particularly TikTok. The next is Boydell & Brewer, a UK academic publisher, who ran a marketing campaign on Twitter to highlight a new title called Medieval Pets, where they encouraged their followers to post pictures of their pets, and the winner received a copy of the book. Not only did this encourage great user engagement and title visibility for the book, which translated into sales, but their Twitter traffic was significantly higher that month too. And then the last example on the right, which is Texas A&M University Press, who are very active in social media marketing. And they ran a series of discounted backlist book sales from their warehouse, which worked very well at driving users from their direct marketing campaigns and social channels back to their website store, where they covered a second promotion on front list titles, which is extremely clever. So hopefully you can see that social media provides a low cost, very low cost, simple to create opportunity that really reaps dividends. And if you have a direct consumer store or not, focus on your social media marketing, and consumers will be much more likely to spot your titles online. So building an online community pages such as book clubs and events pages also really help improve title visibility in your website. And of course, user engagement, which again translates into direct consumer sales. And as I just mentioned, consumers are looking more online. So provide a space where they can find the titles and connect with other book lovers and readers. And this might be through events, online author readings, Q&As, and of course, book clubs. And here on the left, we've got Kensington Books, who successfully run a book club where members can engage with each other and post about their favorite reads. And by linking to book recommendations, Kensington have encouraged their community to explore all around their website, which ultimately delivers more engagement and more sales. And then on the right, we have Northwestern University Press, who run many online and in-person events, which are very popular, bringing in experts and authors to discuss topics and answer questions. Both these publishers use these tools to drive users into their websites, providing the opportunity for further engagement and sales. And if COVID's taught us anything about the importance of bringing people together, even if it's in the online sphere. So moving into our websites, website search, site searchers are almost 3 times more likely to buy than general browsers. So once people are on your website, make it really easy for them to browse and find a title they want. A poor website search will lose your customers. So we recommend making sure you have complete and rich metadata, so it allows it to search across all your content, and bring in your blogs and events into that search if you have them. And of course, we can provide recommendations after this session about how to do that. In this example, which of course is from University of Toronto's Press's website, and this will all be in the handout as well, you can see there are over 150,000 search results. And with so many search results, how can users actually find what they're looking for? So this is where filters come into play. And you can see, you may not be able to see, but on the left-hand side, these are filters. We are immediately giving the user visual results, and now we're encouraging them to explore the content. And you can filter by format, imprint, category, series, price, award, subject, anything. The filters are powerful. And before I move on to the next slide, I'd say users typically try out 3 to 5 search queries before abandoning a site, if there's inadequate search results. So it's really important to deliver accurate and relevant results, and they're unlikely to return. So on to the product page, which is one of the most important pages as publishers on our website. Once your visitor has found a title and they've made a decision to click through to it, make them really like it, make them engage with it by providing as much information and rich metadata content about the book. And I'm going back to the tagline, find it, like it, buy it. And here you see an example product page, again from UTP, where we've got all the expected metadata elements, such as jacket image, long description, author bio, format, size, reviews, praise, and all these metadata elements of helping your visitors really engage with that title. And then you've got your other rich content areas. These could be related books, other content like podcasts, videos, social media links. A good product details page really improves your title visibility, and it's giving you the best chance to get noticed in the search engines. And it pushes your users to buy, obviously. So whether it's through your own cart or linking out to a separate retailer, as I mentioned, if you don't have direct to consumer e-commerce. If you do have an e-commerce store, once your visitors are engaged and they've decided they want to press that buy button, make it really easy for them and prevent that cart abandonment. Give them that easy path to purchase. And here we've listed some of the top reasons that users abandon a cart. Not being clear on extra costs is the top performer. Not wanting to create an account. The process is too long and complicated, and the website had errors, or they didn't trust the store. One of the key benefits of having your own e-commerce store is that you're in control of all of these steps, and you can make the path to purchase easy and user-friendly. And you can also collect analytics. We recommend Google Analytics because it's free and easy to use. And you can review your conversion rates and make necessary modifications. And by making just a few modifications to improve your checkout, you can improve your checkout by huge percentages, like over 40%. So what exactly is an easy path to purchase? First, consider offering a single cart shopping experience on your website. Users want to be able to purchase multiple products in the same cart and check out quickly and easily. And I know it's not always possible for publishers to deliver that, we know. But here, this is where you would link to your various fulfillment suppliers, whether it's print on demand and your various warehouses. And these can be international fulfillment suppliers or from your same website. Ensure it's mobile friendly. And we do say, consider guest checkout, because you saw it's one of the high abandonment rates. But again, that's not always possible for publishers. You can always go back and ask a user to join your community at a later stage, maybe through a special offer. But some users just simply don't have the time to create an account or don't want to. Use Google Auto Refill. The user has the option to automatically fill in their details, but they can still change their shipping address. This makes it even easier for them to purchase. And we encourage our customers, our publishing customers, to offer multiple shipping and payment options, and easily show the user where they enter promotions and discount codes. I'm sure we've all had that problem before. And of course, be very clear about taxes. So this is the final slide before handing back to Brian. What do supply chain issues and the accelerated direct-to-consumer sales growth mean within publishing and mean for your website and your direct-to-consumer store? As we've said, we want them to find it, we want them to like it, we want them to buy it. Everyone is searching online, so make sure your website is giving you the best chance of being found and delivers what they're actually looking for. And then, of course, makes it easy to purchase. And a reminder of why all this matters, because it's going to give you better margins, greater online discoverability, more engaged users, a better loyal community, and higher online sales. So thank you. Hopefully, if anyone's at London Book Fair, please stop by and say hi. And in the meantime, if you've got any other questions, those are my details, and I'll hand back to Brian.
Thank you, Sarah. And the Book Industry Study Group is also going to be exhibiting in London, but our only draw is actually a magician on Tuesday to surprise and delight folks who come by our booth. So it'll be, I think, the highlight of Sarah's book fair experience. To start with a question probably best posed to you, Sarah. Rachel's asking us, as a publisher, rethinking their selling models and trying to think about the impact of direct to consumer. How do they reach all their customers? And what do you, when you're revamping a website or working with a partner, what do you do to provide for diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in the area of accessibility? Because I imagine that's an important part of your thinking these days for any online access.
Absolutely. So we, all publishers have, all our websites are standard accessibility. Obviously, we work with a number of academic publishers who have higher requirements for accessibility. It's actually down to the publisher what their inclusion, equality and diversity is, and we just adhere to that according to their guidelines. But as far as Super does, we provide accessible websites.
So you're following the WCAG and similar guidelines that the W3C and other organizations provide?
Absolutely, we are.
This question actually goes back to something that I think David and you as well, Jason, talked about. Is it possible that we'll go back to the world that we had before March or February of 2020? Are we going to get to a point in sometime in the future where we're again producing books overseas and importing them regularly, or do you think that the world has changed permanently? Maybe start with David. If you unmute yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, I think what we are experiencing now is a leading indicator of permanent change. I think that there will always be a place for manufacturing in Asia and in Europe, particularly if we have a complex format with a lot of manipulatives involved, kids' books in particular. But I think for the most part, we're going to see more onshoring in the years ahead. I think there's simply too much risk with the supply chain, and availability is going to be a critical issue. So that would be my bet.
And Jason, how about from your perspective?
It's similar to David. I mean, there's always a hubris, and again, trying to guess too far ahead, but I think the demographic issues I mentioned, we've been talking about this in the supply chain industry now for 15 to 20 years, as we've sort of watched that bubble get to the retirement end of the spectrum. And then the other side of it is infrastructure, is to recapitalize the infrastructure, particularly rail infrastructure in North America, is an enormous undertaking. And so the corollary is, okay, what do we do next? And I think what it's going to do is price out certain elements from an overseas manufacturing and then repatriate some of that back to North America in time. That also, I think the weather events have exacerbated that from a risk perspective. And certainly there's things we can do to mitigate that and get closer to where we were pre-pandemic. And I think there's elements of the pandemic that will certainly abate. But to get back to where we were before the pandemic, no, I think this is the leading edge of a longer term change.
It's interesting how the intersection of sustainability, supply chain issues, and our ability to support the consumer are all kind of fitting together into this conversation. Sarah, there's an observation that you talked a lot about what makes for effective direct to consumer, but you also seem to make the point that finding a book and engaging with it, liking it, is really key, not necessarily selling it, where you might, which is essentially a strategic decision, but it's no matter how you sell your book, you want people to be able to find it and engage with it. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely, it is, yes, because your space online is so cluttered and you're competing against so many other books. So giving yourself the best chance and your social media marketing and your website and your metadata and all of these things together will give you the best chance of appearing in that search.
And David, we had a question from Jane asking, you'd made the point, I think in your presentation, that the midterm elections may affect paper supply and paper capacity. What's the interplay there? How does that play a role?
Well, I think that, with so much at stake in the 2022 midterm, I think there's going to be more traditional advertising, direct mail in particular. And I think, because of the quality requirements, I think that you can expect to see pressure on coded grades. This is a long-standing tradition that any election year, and also, believe it or not, Summer Olympics tend to also have the same impact on paper demand. My guess is that with so much at stake in the midterms, you can expect the pressure on paper to be even more significant than it is now. And that, frankly, is why I'm urging the folks on the call to start now, to start looking at your options, to start considering alternatives, and to place your orders now, get it into the queue, because if you're late to the game, I think there's a serious risk that you may find yourself waiting, especially given the fact that the run up to the elections typically coincides with the run up to the Christmas season in trade manufacturing.
Thank you. Patricia's asking, this might be best directed at Jason, at least to start. Should authors be wary of print on demand if publishers in their place use POD instead of implementing commercial strategies that would effectively promote a frontlist book? It's an interesting perspective, but I mean, as a publisher who does use POD in specific instances, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that where POD is effective is, looking back to something Sarah mentioned about the rise of the backlist titles, we're seeing the same thing, and it's the volatility of demand. So to me, there's a predictive model that goes in when you have inventory, and the predictive model is pretty much going out the window with back to. We're seeing the same thing with our backlist titles. As something gets mentioned on social media, something gets mentioned in the media, and we'll see sales erupt on a title that's been dormant for years. So I think if it's an NYP new title, it's not as effective a strategy, because you're trying to your line item fill rate. You're trying to make sure you have enough books on demand for the surge in demand for the new idea or the new title. But for backlist titles, I think it's an effective way to save on space, it's an effective way to save on working capital, especially when there's more volatility in that backlist. And the relationship with your publisher is obviously key in how you manage that and how you monitor that. But if you use it as a fill strategy to reduce on-hand supply, it's very effective. It improves the quality of the books, and it improves your ability to meet your line and fill rate.
Yeah, if I may, I think that from a quality standpoint, digital manufacturing has made leaps and bounds and much closer in product quality to offset than it traditionally been. I think the problem is that when you think about where we started with Xerox machines, producing POD, that I think you would run into some issues. But the presses that Hewlett Packard produces, that Canon produces, are certainly up to the task, and I think more than capable of delivering a quality product. Not every product, but a quality product for a variety of different properties.
And I wanted to add, for folks who are interested in these supply chain issues, the BISG is hosting what we call a brown bag lunch series on the first Tuesday of each month. So the next one will be next Tuesday, March 1st. And we're actually looking on Tuesday to have a brief presentation and discussion around questions of sourcing. So, where do you find print books, and how do you produce them in the North American market? So you don't let the discussion end here. If you're interested in that, register for the webinar next Tuesday. I have one other question on the print side, but before I do, I wanted to ask Sarah, you talked about book websites essentially being number 19 on the list. I think you were quoting the Ingram data. Do you know if book websites include major players like Amazon.com or BNN.com?
So that is a good question, and one we asked asked today. So it's not, this is taken from Publishers Weekly. So once I find out the answer, I will let you know.
Great, that would be fun to know.
Until I have the actual data.
It would be particularly encouraging if it excluded the major sites, because that would be a real big win. But even with it, it's nice to be in the top 20.
Yes, exactly.
And here's a kind of a speculative question, so we won't go to Jason first. We've already put you on the spot once, but somebody's asking, do we anticipate a rise in regional or global labor actions, strikes, blockades as examples, that will further impede supply chain issues? Is the market going to see more actions along the lines of what, for example, Ottawa experienced not too long ago, well, and is still experiencing now?
Well, there's already a strike going on now at the UPM paper mill in Finland. You know, that's one of the biggest paper mills supplying the book market. There is some discussion about reaching an agreement, but the strike has been going on for some weeks. And I think, you know, if I were to put myself in the shoes of the folks at the paper mill, if they're not going to get a better deal now, they're never going to get it. So I think, you know, it's to be expected, and I would suggest that we have not seen the last of these.
So kind of going back to the argument you made in your prepared remarks, that contingency planning, even for things that might not seem that likely, becomes more important.
I think that there's never been a time when the impossible is more probable.
Okay. And Jason, how about from your perspective? Is that something you guys think about as well?
Oh yeah, no, there's three factors actually that lead us to believe that this could be a challenge. One was the workforce participation rate, so the ability to attract new labor, and the which is also indicative of the happiness of the existing labor within supply chain is one of the first items. The second is, I would say, the stagnation or even decline in terms of purchasing power capability. So that's wage increase versus inflation increase up to this year has actually been in a state of decline or stagnation since about 2020, the year 2000. But the last one is the increase in inflation. And that purchasing power is going to be more stark to the frontline workers, which will likely lead to interesting demands from that workplace in the coming year. And so certainly we see all of that embedded with the attractiveness of positions to the workforce, as well as the ability to stay up ahead of this. But we think it will eventually lead to some labor action down the road, which is one of the reasons why we're looking to newer relationships within our transportation stream, as well as different paths to get our product to market.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm going to ask you a website question in a moment, but before I do, I wanted to encourage David and Jason to use the chat to put your email addresses on, so that if folks on the call, Sarah's already done this, folks on the call want to reach you, they can get it, they have easy access. So Afshan was asking, essentially, how can publishers use the data they gather about online consumers to position their products on the web? Is thinking about analytics from our publishers on website, which you talked about, and when selling products to online retailers like Amazon or BNN.com. You know, how does that mix kind of work out for the folks that you're working with?
Well, I can only speak from the kind of website and internet point of view. I'm not privy to Amazon's analytics. But with a website, we use, as I mentioned, Google Analytics, which is free, which can capture everything. It captures a lot of data. So if you're doing some social media marketing, if you've got some e-commerce, you can start to look at that data and see what type of consumer is actually making you the most sales, and then do a bit more marketing to that type of consumer. You know, are returning consumers buying more than first-time visitors? And then over a period of time, not very long, you know, 3 to 6 months, you can start to put together a strategy, a marketing strategy to target the right type of user.
And is that something that Superdue helps with, or are you simply building the website, or do you also help with the analytics?
We can definitely, we don't analyze the analytics. We're happy to kind of give any publisher free training, which we do a lot. You don't have to be a Superdue publisher at all. You know, it's kind of quite altruistic for the good of the publisher. We can show you what to look for, how to use Google Analytics, most effectively, and actually make actionable decisions from it.
And maybe this is a new line of business, but Patricia's asking if you assist agents who look at making author websites or cooperate with web marketing agencies. So is that work that you're doing or thinking about doing?
Absolutely, we work with authors, and please do kind of contact me, because that's a whole nother side. So yes, we do.
Yeah, our conversation today was really specific to the publishing side.
Absolutely.
I'll probably have time for one more question. So maybe I could ask each of you to say what's the, if you had a takeaway or perhaps two takeaways that you want to make sure everybody's thinking about as you wrap up this webinar, what would you ask people to remember? Perhaps start with you, David, and then go to Jason and Sarah.
Yeah, I think that my view here is that this is the time to cultivate all the relationships you can with manufacturers and with the paper mills. This is not the time to perhaps be overly focused on things that are not working quite as well as they should be. What we've found, and I think other manufacturers would attest to this, is that we've heard from organizations that we'd only dreamed of hearing from in years gone past because of the capacity issues. To sort of coin a phrase from The Godfather, keep your friends close, but your manufacturers and paper mills closer.
So cast a wide net as well.
Right, exactly.
Jason, how about you? What's a good takeaway from your perspective and experience?
I think the key is I'm looking at sources of, and I've been in this industry for some time, and I'm looking at sources of information and data that would have never struck me as important to our industry, and I'm starting to view them now because the intersection points between different factors that you'd mentioned, sustainability being one of them, are starting to influence a supply chain in real and dramatic ways. And so just be aware of those, be ready to talk to them because there are significant changes coming to supply chain. And if you're open to them and able to adapt to them, that will give you competitive advantage going forward.
Music to my ears. Sarah, how about you?
So from a website perspective, I would say have complete metadata, start with that, but then list your goals you want your website to do, and then try some of the things we spoke to today. They're all free, and they could really help make a difference and drive your direct-to-consumer business.
Yeah, and I imagine use all of that data to make books both more findable and more engaging. Well, thank you, David, Jason, and Sarah, for putting your thoughts together for today and sharing them with this audience. I really appreciate it. I think it's opened up a conversation that will be continuing as early as next Tuesday.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody.